listened to that gentleman's and eloquent introduction, and then thought about myself, I wondered who he was talking about. But you know, it's always good to have someone to say something good about you. And I'm delighted to be here this morning. In spite of been speaking all weekend, and when Brother Joe called me, he said, this is for the children. And I tell you, we have to give these young people a round of applause because it could have been the other way around. Just glad to see how you are working with young folks, because a church that doesn't have any grown young people working is a dying church. On August the 28th of 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King told the world that he had a dream. And growing up, Memphis, Tennessee is my hometown. And I remember as a little boy, on April the 4th of 1968, right around the corner from my home, on our Van Street, was the Lorraine's Hotel, is where Dr. Martin Luther King was killed. And I remember the day when my mother and aunties and everybody was running out in the streets. I was only 5 years old, but the only thing that I always remember them say that they didn't kill him. They didn't have to kill him. And since that day, I've been following Dr. King. So if you don't mind, I would like to would you just travel with me back to a hot summer day on the state capital of Washington, D.C., when Dr. King told the world that he had a dream that we all still share today. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope for millions of Negro slaves who had been sealed in the flame of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long nights of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we come here today to dramatize the shameful condition. In a sense, we come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republics wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall back. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as our citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. say to my people, who stands on the warm threshold that leads into the palace of justice, in the process of gaining our rightful place, let us not be guilty of wrongful deed. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must well conduct our struggles on the high plains of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence again and again. We must rise to the majestic heights, meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. But many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk